Photos from the past. Anton Kuznetsov was a man who lived an orderly and predictable life. He worked in an office, pursued his hobbies in his free time, and rarely encountered anything that could disrupt his routine existence. Everything changed when he decided to conduct an audit of the old family archive. One day, while sorting through old things in the attic, he came across a dusty chest covered in a layer of cobwebs. The chest was made of old wood, decorated with copper corners and clasps, and looked as if no one had touched it for many years. On the lid was a yellowed piece of paper with the inscription, "Photos from the past." Anton's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to open the chest. As he lifted the lid, a strange light flashed in his eyes. Inside, he found several stacks of photographs, neatly folded into old paper envelopes. Each stack was labeled in a different style, with dates and names. Anton began to look through the contents, starting with the oldest pictures. The photographs were black and white, and their edges were slightly curved with age. He saw his ancestors in them, his grandparents, aunts, and uncles. The faces were familiar, but strange at the same time, as if their expressions were frozen in eternal anticipation. But among these pictures, he found one photograph that struck him. It depicted a young man. He looked very similar to Anton, but with some differences. He was wearing old clothes, and the background looked like an old house that Anton did not recognize. As Anton continued to unpack the box, he found more photographs of the same man. In one of them, he was sitting at a table surrounded by strange lighting, and it seemed as if a dark light was emanating from him. This photograph was so frightening that Anton felt a chill down his spine. In another photograph, this young man was standing in front of a house that looked even older and more sinister than any other house he had ever seen. Anton looked at each new photograph with a growing sense of anxiety. One of them showed him standing among strange objects that looked like something out of a nightmare. The faces of the people in the background were distorted, filled with fear and horror. Anton tried to figure out what this could mean, but no explanation could ease his fear. On the third night, when Anton looked at the photographs again, he noticed that they had begun to change. Some of them had acquired additional details that were not there before. In one of the photographs, where he was sitting in an old room, a shadow appeared in the reflection of the window that did not correspond to any object known to him. The shadow looked like a person, but it was blurry and ominous. Other photos became even more eerie. In one picture, he saw himself in an old house he had never been to. The house was shrouded in fog, and strange lights glowed in its windows. This time, his face was marred by fear and terror, and the photo itself looked as if it had been taken in some distorted dimension. Anton began to feel that these photographs were not just captured moments, but something more. Each image became more sinister and unpleasant, and he could not tear himself away from them. He noticed that each photograph had unpredictable changes. The faces of the people in the pictures began to distort, becoming more and more frightening. One night, when Anton decided to look through another batch of photographs, he saw a picture of himself tied to his own bed in his bedroom. His face was full of terror, and in the room, besides him, there was another figure, whose shadow stretched out menacingly. This figure seemed non-physical, but its presence in the picture was obvious. Anton tried to figure out what this could mean. He began to research his family history and ancient legends associated with this house and the photographs. In some old books, he found references to strange rituals and dark forces that could explain what was happening. However, none of the explanations could fully explain the terrifying changes in the photographs. The fear grew stronger. Anton noticed that his life began to change, reality began to distort, and he felt that someone was watching him. He began to avoid the old house and the photographs, but their influence continued to haunt him. One night he discovered that all the photographs had disappeared. In the room where they had been laid out, only black spots remained, reminiscent of shadows. These spots began to move, and in them one could discern darkness and ominous silhouettes. Anton began to feel that something ominous in his house had become more obvious. He tried to get rid of the photos, but they kept reappearing, as if their return was part of some sinister cycle. Anton felt trapped and unable to escape. His life began to turn into a constant nightmare, where reality and distortion merged into one continuous horror. Every night he woke up from terrible dreams in which he saw himself in old houses, surrounded by shadows and ghosts. His fear and anxiety grew, and he did not know what to do. He went to a psychotherapist, but his stories about photographs and strange phenomena were perceived as signs of stress or mental disorder. Anton began to understand that these photographs could be part of some curse or sinister plan. They did not simply reflect moments from his life, but seemed to anticipate his fate. Each picture seemed to be part of some dark prophecy that was inexorably drawing him into its own trap. Eventually, he decided to go back to the old house to find definitive answers. He found the old room where all those photos were left and discovered that everything in the house had changed. The trees outside the window had become twisted into strange shapes, and the lighting looked foggy and ominous. Anton found a few more photographs that looked even more creepy. In one of them, he saw himself surrounded by mysterious figures and creatures that were full of fear and horror. These pictures seemed to be fixed in some kind of sinister time bubble, in which he was not just an observer, but a part of a terrifying spectacle. The last photograph he saw was of Alexei himself, as if he were frozen in time, surrounded by fog and shadows. His eyes were filled with deep terror, and he looked as if he were part of something far more sinister and inescapable. Anton realized that he would never be able to escape this curse. He realized that these photographs were not just images, but part of a dark cycle that consumed everything connected to him. His life became a constant torment, and every day he faced the horror that was captured in these pictures. Anton's story remains a mystery to those who have heard of his misadventures. Some say that the old photographs are still in the house, and that they continue to change, distorting reality and consuming those who dare to see them. Legend has it that each new generation that finds these photographs becomes part of the same sinister cycle that never ends. And so, Anton remained a prisoner of his fears, and his story became a warning for those who dare to look for answers in old photographs.